Monthly meeting. Today is Tuesday the 2nd, 2024, 5 p.m. I am Donna Auger. I am in place of the mayor at the moment until he shows up. So please, Brandon, please call to order.
Murray.
Here.
Or
Griffin.
roll call, sorry.
Here.
Auger.
Here.
Rowe.
Here.
Brown.
Here.
Montgomery.
Here.
Chairbox.
Okay. Okay, official action can only be taken on items which appear on the agenda. The Jenks Aquarium Authority may adopt, approve, ratify, deny, deferred, recommend, amend, strike, or continue any agenda item except for item 1. Consideration and appropriate action relating to a request for the approval of the consent agenda. All matters listed under consent are considered by the authority to be routine and will be enacted by one motion. Any trustee may, however, remove an item from the consent agenda by request. A motion to adopt the consent agenda is non-debatable.
Move to approve. Second.
Okay.
Murray.
Yes.
Griffin.
Yes.
Rowe.
Yes.
Brown.
Yes.
Montgomery.
Yes.
Auger.
Yes. Item 3, we'll skip item 2. Encroachment agreement between the Jenks Aquarium Authority and HD5 Entertainment LLC, and that's on page 106 if you are following the agenda. Hang on, let me get there. This will be under Mr. Sherrill. Marseille? Okay, sorry.
That's okay. Didn't say. Take your pick.
I always pick on him first.
I'll let Mr. Shrout answer all the questions.
Well, it does have his name on the document, just an FYI.
Okay.
Okay.
Man, I'm going to sit down. No. Okay. Every time I come up here, I use the wrong words because I'm so used to saying council. So you are trustees. I never can remember that. Okay. Good evening, trustees and staff. Thank you. Well, this is only like the second time I presented to the JAA. I know, right? Well, we are very, 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 very close to finalizing the agreement between High Five and the OAF and the JAA and the City of Jenks. So this is very exciting. There's still always other pieces on my end. So there's always additional reviews, et cetera. But tonight, we had tried to get this on the agenda for a special meeting and we didn't have quorum. So this is an encroachment agreement between the Jenks Aquarium Authority and HD5 Entertainment, which is High Five. And this item did go to City Council and was approved. And I don't have that date. I didn't write it down. But basically, what we have is an economic development agreement and was done. And then now we have the parking. And they have provided, let me see if I can get the right, I'll have them pull up a page for you so you can see the map. Brandon, maybe go to Exhibit A, which I think is page 125. Yep, that'll work. Okay. I always mark up these maps thinking it's very clear and then find out from half the people that look at them that it's not very clear. So the green kind of triangular piece is the property that's owned by the OAF. And a few weeks ago, through council and through OAF and JAA, we have dedicated new right-of-way. So all of that, all the blue hatch lines are the street that was recently built. And then it goes a little wider than the street. And so what you see in the blue is the actual street right-of-way. So that was recently dedicated. And when we began talks with High Five, in order to protect the aquarium and in order to protect the interest of the OAF, we asked them to provide as much on-site parking as they can. And then when we saw that they were close but couldn't quite meet what we felt like was an adequate number of parking spaces. We asked them to do on-street parking. And so if you look at the street, and then you see a little bubbled area, can you kind of zoom into that, Brandon? Okay, there you go. So there's a little bubbled area on the right and left of the street, and that's on-street parking. So they said, yes, we will build on-street parking, but as you can see, that encroaches into the newly dedicated right-of-way, and it also encroaches slightly onto the OEF land. And then where that arrow is pointing, and the green line, that's the property line for High Five on the left of the screen, and on the right of the screen is parking, and the OEF has said, well, in reality, there's not a whole lot we can do between the street and High Five's property, so if you'll provide additional parking, we will allow you to encroach it. So that worked out all well and good, and that's all part of the encroachment/parking agreement that you see before you. What I didn't realize, or maybe I did and forgot, I don't know, I've counted parking spaces probably 14 times, maybe 40 times. What I didn't remember, at least I'll say that, is they're still short about 24 spaces. In my last calculation, it looks like they actually provided 198 spaces. We asked them for 222. And so I would recommend that you approve it with the addendum or an amendment to your motion to say that the additional spaces required would actually be true shared parking with the aquarium. And I am very apologetic for not catching that, but Mr. Montgomery did and brought it to my attention.
Well, and it's consistent with what the OAF's talked about, and basically we've already approved, and that is, we were okay with a small amount of shared parking, which was only a small amount of their total requirement. So I do have a proposed amendment that Teresa worked on that we believe will work. And it just allows for that shared parking agreement to get signed and not have to come back to us for approval.
Correct, and thank you.
And just to point out that in the city agreement, the on-street parking that they're building, they agree to share that with other aquarium uses, other aquarium things.
Yeah,
they're
So it's a
agreeing
dual,
there
it's a
with
duality
us.
as far as sharing.
Yeah, in the actual agreement that we're approving here tonight, it's available to the public. It's not their parking or our parking necessarily.
It's just everybody's.
It's just to be used.
Nice. Any questions?
Could you reconcile again on, you said they originally agreed, or the ordinance required 222, is that what you said?
That is, so what happens for outdoor entertainment and for indoor entertainment, the code doesn't specify, so they provided an analysis based on other event venues and what they required, and then we did an analysis as well. And I went to Main Event, which Mayor Boggs mentions often. I think he frequents there a lot, I'm
Yeah.
not sure. I went to Main Event and went to like 6 different dates and looked at the aquarium parking and Main Event parking, and every time aquarium had 3 or 4 times more parking, more spaces being used than Main Event. And so tried to do a comparison, like if they did have people at the same time, how competitive would it be? And obviously we would hope that they would be more successful than Main Event, but even in that case, they didn't even come close to what the aquarium was. There was ample space, put it that way, between the times and everything. So to answer your question, the code itself does not say you have to have, like office it tells you, restaurant it tells you, but for entertainment it does not tell you. So we took their information and then I did my own homework, and that's how we came up with the numbers.
Okay, and then I guess and Keith maybe, I thought they were agreed to 191 originally. You said 198,
I think they provided 198.
198.
And what we said would be best
And
is
the
if they had
24,
222.
so the 24 shared that's how you're getting to the 222.
Yeah, the math moves around a little bit because of what originally we thought could go on to the encroachment space we're talking about versus how it's drawn now. And so that may shift just slightly. So I think, I would propose that we amend our approval here to add a shared parking provision whereby JAA agrees to share aquarium parking spaces equal to the remaining number of required, but for high five, but somewhere in that 20 to 30 range. That's, so at least put a boundary on it.
I would say you're probably sharing not less than 20 and not more than 30,
Yeah.
would be my estimate.
But
Based on the many-
you're satisfied that a total of 222, regardless of what we're calling it, is sufficient? Thank you.
Absolutely.
Any other questions? Okay, I'll take any motion at this point in time.
Well, I would move we approve the item as amended, as we've discussed, to add a shared parking provision by which JAA agrees to provide shared aquarium parking places equal to the amount of required parking places in that 20 to 30 range of total places.
Second.
Okay, we have a first and a second. Please vote.
Murray.
Yes.
Griffin.
Yes.
Rowe.
Yes.
Brown. Yes. Montgomery.
Yes?
OJ.
Yes. Okay, and now we are staff report. Mr. Alexopoulos.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I'm just getting over a cold, so I don't sound real good. Some of our projects that are ongoing, the shark quarantine footings are complete. They're working on underground plumbing right now for both mechanical as well as filtration for us. There's certain underground pipes that have to be in place. And they're also digging right now the pit for the equipment, an equipment pit, which is like a 5 or 6 foot deep pit. And then they will be pouring concrete soon as well. The plants are coming up in the pollinator garden, and some are already blooming. About another month or so, the construction company that built the garden will come and assess what plants made it through the winter and what didn't, and they will replace any plants that did not make it. The irrigation system on the parking lot expansion sprung a lot of leaks from the freeze, and so apparently there was some installation errors, so that is going to be getting rectified soon. Easter was a success. This year we did we kept it mostly indoors, and so and we did candy stations, kind of like Halloween, because that was one of the complaints, was that it's just kind of a rush and then things are gone, and so so that was a real hit. It actually we had a lot of compliments, and that way also people could come out throughout the day, and they weren't having to all be there at one time. So that was really convenient. And then I don't know if it was called the Holiday House or whatever that little house was that the chamber brought to us, which I'm so glad I agreed to. It's this really quirky looking, cartoony looking house. And we put our Easter Bunny in there. And so there was a line of people going in to get their picture taken with the Easter Bunny, which was really, really neat. So a lot of great reviews on that, a lot of great comments. We had about 1,730 attend that day, which is pretty strong. Spring break went really well. There was no real hiccups. Attendance was a little less than last year, but the weather was a lot better than it was last year. And then the one kind of gray sky day that we did have this year had really strong attendance. So we're kind of, you just kind of roll the dice with the weather. The aquarium run is Saturday, and so the packet pickup is ongoing this week. Is anybody going to run in that?
Other than you?
You better call the ambulance from now. Be like, oh, he didn't get very far. That was funny, Chris. And that's what I have right now. Does anybody have any questions? It's been kind of quiet, so. Well, the kids haven't been quiet, which has been great.
This may not be really direct to you. I noticed one of the fairly large expenses was Microsoft licenses, and
Yeah.
we
and that's-
have those, and it just seemed higher than anything we're paying, and I just didn't know how.
Yeah, and so we're doing that through and honestly, the best person, I shouldn't say the best, but a person that would have more information on that would be Carrie, or the IT guy for the city, and from what I understand, it's a combined thing. So it's not just the aquarium. Is that
Well-
correct, or no?
And John had this question before the last meeting, but I think it's based on per user, and so the aquarium has a significant, I mean, if there's 75 employees, I don't know how many
That's true.
licenses we have, but we've also been working to increase our security on the system, and it's a subscription model, so, the more security you want, the more it's gonna cost, but,
Yeah, we have been adding a lot of cameras as well. So,
It just jumped out at me when I saw
and I
it.
think it was 24,000?
Well, that was one of them, but there was multiple underneath it, I thought, so. I can't seem to find it right now, but
Well, we can,
I'm not questioning, I just seemed like it was a number that, it jumped off the page when I was looking through it.
well, trustee, just know that when I'm reviewing IT expenses, I think the same thing.
Well, I'm sure that's true.
But what we can do is have Carrie answer kind of specifically what we have, why it costs what it costs, and how that cost is allocated to the aquarium. Because I know we have it organization-wide, whether it's JAA, JPWA, or city, we all have the same service and we all pay the same amount per user. So I'd be more than happy to have him explain why it seems expensive.
Well, it had some other software issues in there, but this one, mine was specific Microsoft, so
Yeah,
I don't know if that was just the way it was recorded or
yeah.
that'd be nice just to.
Yeah, I know that trustee Brown brought up a similar, basically the same question a few weeks ago about the Microsoft license expense. And it could be that there's other things when you look at that line item that are included, but we will certainly get the answer.
Clarification is always good. Any other questions?
I would just mention, you did say that, I think this quarter, everything's kind of cyclical in a way, so, we had a super strong year in 2023, a very strong year in '22, and so now, when we're looking at attendance numbers and looking at revenue numbers, it's harder and harder to compete, and I think we were up in attendance when I say quarter, I mean starting July 1st is quarter one, and September 1st is quarter two. We had two great quarters, not only revenue, but attendance-wise. And I don't know, I think the weather in January being terrible, even though normally that translates to more people showing up, it was so bad people just didn't want to leave their house to begin with. And then we've had such nice weather since then, and the fact that we had such strong attendance last year in the third quarter. We didn't meet the attendance numbers, but if you look at on page 104, the revenues, we're still tracking $400,000 ahead in revenue and in operating revenue, and only about about 200,000 ahead in expenses. So, we continue to increase revenue and hold expenses in check, and I think that we're going to end the year very strong and have, I think, the third year in a row where we will have, at least $1 million surplus, if not 1.5, or closer to $2 million surplus in operating revenue and expenditures, so.
And I was concerned about that a little bit because I'm kind of paranoid with stuff like that. And I called some other aquariums and some friends of mine that run aquariums, and one in particular who his company runs multiple aquariums, including the St. Louis Aquarium. And I kind of said, "Hey, how's y'all's attendance been?" He says, "It's dropped off." And I said, "Really?" He goes, "Yeah." And then he mentioned also that weather that they got. And he said, "Yeah, that killed us for that quarter." So I think it's something that everybody's kind of experiencing that same oscillation there.
And I might mention too, it's not just, so we see the aquarium revenue and expenses, but we see sales tax as well. And we've had surging sales tax since 2020 and even before 2020, but obviously 2020 cratered. And where we are as a city in terms of sales tax is we're basically flat. And so taking into account inflation and everything, to be flat means, people are spending less just out in the world on stuff, especially on optional experiences or food and stuff like that. And so to see where we are with the aquarium with a $400,000 increase fiscal year to date in revenue, I think is extremely strong. And so it's an election year, interest rates are up, everybody spent the money they saved during COVID.
Right.
And so I think everything's going really well. And I think in the next couple of years when things really start to rebound and there's more certainty in the economic situation, I think that we're really poised to continue to increase.
Also, the outlet mall.
The
I'm
outlet
really
mall, yeah.
Looking forward to that. I think that's going to be, we were running some numbers and every 1% we get from their traffic equals like 10% for us. So that's huge. And I'm
Yeah,
not
you
saying
think
we're going to
about-
get 1% or, maybe we get a half or maybe we get 5%, but whatever, that kind of is
That'll be a
how it
big boost.
equates, yeah.
1% is 60,000 people.
Yeah.
Is it on its target, everything going?
August 15th.
So far, so good.
Any other questions? All right. Well, thanks for having me.
Thank you. Okay, any other items we want to talk about? Okay, we are now adjourned. It is 5:23. 5:23.
Regularly scheduled meeting of the Jenks City Council. We are here tonight, Tuesday, April 2nd of 2024 in Jenks, America. Happy to be alive and breathing well. My name is Corey Box. I'll be your chair for this meeting this evening. My apologies for missing the previous one. And we will begin call to order with a verification of our attendance, please.
Short,
Here.
Emmons. Here. OJ.
Here.
Murray.
Here.
Brown. Here. Klein. Present. Mayor Box.
Here, we got a full house, and for tonight's invocation, we welcome back Mr. Pastor Tommy Davis from New Directions International right here in Jenks, America. How are you, sir? Well, how are you? Good. I think I've seen you so much, I can probably just preach your sermons for you. What you got for us tonight?
Invocation tonight.
All right, very well.
Thank you, Mayor Box. Thank you to everyone present tonight. Thank you so much for this privilege to give an invocation. Father, we thank you for continuing to bless and favor and keep and protect the Jenks community. We're grateful, Lord, for what you continue to do to make Jenks a wonderful and excellent community. We also thank you, Lord, for our leadership. Thank you for everyone that serves in leadership in this community. Thank you for every resident as well. We ask, oh God, that you would continue to lead our leadership as they continue to lead us. And we'll be forever careful to give you the glory, honor, and the praise. In Jesus' name we pray and ask it all. Amen.
Amen. If you would remain standing as we pledge allegiance to our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Looks like we got a young one for tonight's Animal Welfare Spotlight. Welcome back, Mr. Fred Reed. How are you, sir?
Good. Mr. Mayor, Council, got free puppy breath tonight. This is Yeti. Yeti is about eight weeks old, and is what the vet says. He is a little mix of probably a shepherd and something else. He likes to give kisses with that puppy breath. He will be a big dog, if you can't tell. So keep that into consideration if you want to adopt him. And if anyone is interested in meeting Yeti or any of his adoptable friends at the shelter, they can always contact us at the police department at 918-299-6311. Email animalcontrol@jenksok.org, and look us up on Pet Finder or Facebook at Jenks Animal Welfare.
Was he from a litter, or is he just?
He was just a single that was found.
Oh.
Does he come with a free cooler?
A little Yeti cooler.
Not a
Soft
not a Yeti.
side, even the soft side? Oh, okay.
He is so cute.
He's cute. Good luck to you, Mr. Yeti. Sold to the lady in the third row. All right, we do not have a proclamation tonight, so we move on to citizens' comments or public comments. If you are a member of the public and you would like to address the council tonight on any item that is not on our agenda, you are welcome to do so. The floor is yours. And if you haven't given public comment before, we ask your name, address, either of your personal address or your business, and then we will be all ears.
Okay, thank you. My name is Todd Palmer, and I'm the owner of Rusty Gate Creamery and Market on Main Jenks at 101 West Main Street in downtown. Earlier this year, I started meeting with the downtown business owners, and we discussed the district name and the negative comments that we were seeing on Facebook. I asked the owners if they were interested in reforming the Downtown Merchants Association, and all of them were in favor. And to get this, I actually had to walk the town because I didn't know anybody. I sent out meeting invites to all the businesses, to the business owners on Main Street, and at that point, there was 23 of them. On February 20th, we had our first meeting to begin the process of reforming the association. There were 12 business owners present at that meeting. I explained why I felt that we needed to have a business association and the process of reforming it. After the meeting, I provided all the owners with minutes to the meeting, as well as a nomination form for the leadership. When I sent that out, I asked for 2 weeks to get that form back so we could begin the nomination process. What ended up happening was I didn't get any of them back. So I started having to, again, go around town and talking to each one of the business owners individually and asking them to fill out the form and giving some names. So in doing that, I also gave them a polling paper asking them about the name of the downtown district. So on the polling sheet, I gave 3 options: the 10 District, Jenks America, and Other. And then they could write in. The results of this poll that was taken, there were 3 votes for the 10 District, 19 for Jenks America, and 3 Other. And each business owner signed on that poll. On March 28th, we held our second meeting, and 13 business owners attended and voted on the leadership. During this meeting, I included the poll. I explained about how I did that, and I took a poll among the members that were present if they would agree that we should use the Jenks America name, if they would want to do that. Everybody raised their hand affirmatively. So after this meeting, with the few new people that came, we're up to 29 actual business owners that are now a part of our group. So now the Jenks Downtown Merchants Association is formed and we have leadership. Our goal as an association is to work with the City of Jenks, the Chamber of Commerce, and other agencies to move Jenks forward as a vibrant and exciting place to have a business and to hold events to bring more customers to the downtown area. Some of the ideas that we're currently exploring are the Jenks Art Crawl, a farmer's market, and a taste testing Saturday. And we've had other discussions on other things. A new Facebook page is being created now and will be published soon. We want to ask for your support of the Jenks Downtown Merchants Association and Jenks America. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Palmer. Mrs. Bonner, how are you?
I'm here for moral support, but I'm Sherry Bonner. I own the Pink Lily and Reds Mercantile, 112 South First Street in Jenks. I have been here since 2010, and I just want to say I am excited about everything going on, but I do feel strongly about Jenks America. It kind of sets a name for the whole area. And I do focus on the main street of downtown because that's where I've been for 14 years. But I'm very proud to be here in Jenks, and I hope we can move forward in a positive manner for everyone involved. And we have some exciting new businesses, and I'm very, very excited about it. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Sherry. Floor is still open. Anyone else? James, you're up. You want to chat? I should have got you before you sat down. I'm just kidding with you. You don't have to. Wow, if I could just get everybody to come up by calling their name, this would be a good thing.
Totally unprepared. Our focus.
Can I have your name, please, for the
Oh,
record
James
and
Pierce.
address, please?
James Pierce. I own American Heritage Antiques at 101 East Main Street. I've been down here since January of 2000, 24 years now. And of course, I've seen a lot of change over the years and a lot of growth and a lot of really massive growth in the last 5 years or so that we're all real excited about. The only thing that I would really add to this is that we are not against anyone particularly. This is not a strike at anyone. This is a let's move things forward with positivity, with getting past some angst that has been stirred up over the name of a district that none of us had any input on. None of us had any input on. We, as our customers are coming to us and saying, what is this? I don't understand. And we're getting this over and over and over again. So at some point, we feel like that is hindering some of the growth that we're wanting to see down there. We are all about what quote, the 10 district is bringing to Jenks as far as the drive, the exposure has been great, but we also feel a lot of angst that's been stirred up, and we're ready to get past that and move forward. We want the growth down there, but we want everybody to be seen, heard, recognized. Their voices need to be heard. If we're gonna change it away from Jenks America, that's fine, but let's get a community group to decide that. Let's get some voices rather than one person dictating what the rest of us are gonna live with. And potentially owning that name that then could be used against us at every time in the future. This needs to be a community effort, and I think that this is a great start for that. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, sir. Have a good evening. Anyone else? Okay, we'll close the floor to the public, and we'll move on to tonight's general business. Item number 1 is the consideration and appropriate action relating to our consent agenda. The council has an option to approve the consent agenda as a whole with a motion, or if you guys have anything you want to discuss further, you can pull those items if you will.
Motion to approve?
Second.
All right, we have a proper motion to second on item 1. Let's vote, please.
Short.
Yes.
Emmons.
Yes.
OJ.
Yes.
Murray.
Yes.
Brown. Yes. Klein. Yes. Mayor Box.
Yes, item 2 will be pulled. Moving on to item 3, ordinance 1643, related to JZ 24-690, a request to rezone a tract of land to DC, which is downtown core, repealing all ordinances or parts thereof in conflict herewith, providing for severability, declaring an emergency. The general location we're talking about tonight is 601 East Main Street. We are on page 116 if you are following along. And good evening, Mrs. Hilton.
Good evening, Mayor Box and Council. This is an exciting request, a request to rezone from CH and CG. CH is a legacy district, and a little sliver of this lot was commercial general, and they are rezoning to downtown core. There is a business going in already, and it should be very exciting. The Planning Commission voted 6-1 to approve the request at the regularly scheduled meeting held on March 21st, 2024. We had one planning commissioner absent. If you look on page 117, that's good enough. I'm going to just zoom in a little bit. There you go. You can see Main Street. This was an old station, filling station, I think is what we called them back in the day, at the northeast corner of 6th and Main, and I included some old photos just because I thought it was kind of fun. Some of the changes in the blue and red was interesting photo. So Planning Commission and staff do recommend approval of this item. Rezoning from commercial heavy and commercial general to downtown core.
Could you give us some, because it's been a while now since we've UDO'd, if that's a verb, can you tell us a little bit about what the expectations are, generally speaking, if somebody were in the public and wanted to know what's really changing here?
So
Just this
when we updated
10,000-foot
the
explanation.
comprehensive plan, we had an idea that the Main Street all the way to A and all the way south to Aquarium would be a very special district with very exclusive zoning. And so it would, the way that the code was written, it would bring more retail or encourage more retail. Didn't require parking. You could go higher. It just made it easier to build. The primary change to uses was automotive uses, I would say was probably the primary thing. So a filling station wouldn't be allowed in 2024 on that corner. And that's about it. It was our hope to rezone all the way to 9th Street, and you can see, whoops, where's the comprehensive plan map? Thank you, Brandon. You can see there, it would have been nice to get all the way to 9th Street, but that didn't happen. We rezoned to 5th Street. And so now, as people come forward with redevelopment and reinvestment into their properties, or they're leasing properties from other people, they choose to go with the downtown core zoning because it has better setbacks, it has better Vulcan area standards, and it's just a better zoning for what they want to do.
It's for the most part, it's more restrictive. Is that safe to say? In a good way? For,
Uses only.
yeah,
It's
okay.
less restrictive in everything but uses.
Okay, yeah, I guess, whatever, we get, everybody gets what we want out of it, okay. All right, thank you, Mrs. Hilton. Any questions from council for Mrs. Hilton? Anybody on my right?
Do you have any idea of
Mr.
their
Emmons?
intent? Do you have any idea of their intent to do with the property?
Yes, so Amy, who currently runs Cajun Blackbird, is moving Cajun Blackbird there. And she's also doing a paint studio in the front, and I think she wants to use the warehouse portion. I don't know if that's going to be immediate, and they probably will have a mural up pretty quick.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Emmons. Any questions from the council on my left? You guys switch your name tags around if you don't mind.
Mayor Box.
People know. Yes, sir.
Ms. Hilton, is this the first request that we're aware of the changing to the downtown core of that east of 5th Street? Is this the first one?
I think east of 5th Street.
Okay.
Who? I don't think so.
First we've approved, though. First that's
First,
come to
yeah.
our attention.
I didn't think so,
but it
could be.
You are correct, yeah. It's the-
I think it was the first one
Okay.
east of.
Yeah.
We expect probably more.
I think so. It just, at the end of the day, it is a much better zoning for 90% of the uses.
Right. Thank you.
Any more questions from council? All right, so this is obviously a zone change, so we can close the floor to council. We can open the floor to the public. Item number 3, any questions or comments? All right, thank you. No questions, comments from the floor. We will come back to council. Item number 3, if there's no further discussion, we can make a motion.
Make a motion to approve JZ 24-690 as presented.
Second.
Thank you both. We have a proper motion and a second. Item 3, ordinance number 1643, JZ 24-690. Let's vote, please.
Short.
Yes.
Emmons. Yes. OJ.
Yes.
Murray. Yes. Brown. Yes. Klein. Yes. Mayor Box.
Yes, item 4 is the emergency clause for ordinance number 1643.
Motion to approve emergency clause?
Second.
Thank you both. Proper motion, second. Item 4, let's vote, please.
Short.
Yes.
Emmons. Yes. OJ.
Yes.
Murray. Yes. Brown. Yes. Klein.
Yes.
Mayor Box.
Yes. Item 5, ordinance 1644, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Jenks, County of Tulsa, State of Oklahoma, amending city code, our development standards, 16-7, our sign standards, 16-8 in subdivision standards, and 16-9 administrative procedures, repealing all ordinances or parts thereof in conflict herewith, providing for severability and declaring an emergency. Page 123 on our agenda. Mrs. Hilton.
Thank you, Mayor Box, council, and staff. This is a regular update by staff. We did one, I think the last one we did was in March? No, it was before that. So we approved the Unified Development Ordinance in April of 2022, and then we recently brought you our first, I think it was October, our first round of edits. And we have a few more tonight, and then there's at least one more round that I will try to bring to you in the very near future, and I'll go ahead and touch on what those would be. We need to update the language regarding small cell lighting and noise. So all 3 of those will come before you very soon. But on tonight's agenda, there were 3 primary categories that we looked at, and one is billboard signs. And so currently, the way that the Unified Development Ordinance is written, it says, for sign separation, a minimum distance of 1,000 linear feet shall be required between billboard signs. The separation requirement shall apply to either side of the roadway regardless of which side of the roadway the sign is located. And what has been recommended is a minimum distance of 1,000 linear feet shall be required between billboard signs. The separation requirement shall apply to the side of the roadway the sign is located upon. So the current language is more restrictive than what is being proposed. So it would allow for additional billboards on, and the spacing would only be based on the side of the road that the sign is on. And that matches what ODOT has in their code.
And I know it says roadway, but we're talking about highways or turnpikes only.
Right, thank you. That is correct. So the Planning Commission did vote to approve the amendments with the exception of this one. And they recommended leaving it the same. So they recommended to keep the blue 3A, and staff has recommended the red language. If you look on page 124, it's a little bit more detailed, and it does say here, so this would be another, it says number 3, sign spacing requirements are found in the Oklahoma Department of Transportation outdoor advertising brochure. So they actually have a brochure, and it says billboards may be placed along United States federal highways, federal interstate highways, state of Oklahoma highways, U.S., or state tollways or turnpikes only. And so again, identifying that I, regarding billboards, is one of the requests that we're making. Then Mr. Chris Cloyd, the city engineer, provided a couple of edits to the floodplain ordinances. And that's what you'll see in section 16-6-8 F1, M1, M1A12, M5C, N2, in addition to 16-9-5 and 16-9-10. And then on general, under streets in 16-8-2, we're just rearranging the actual words, and we added new definitions to how we would name streets. That being said, and I'll read the recommendation, Planning Commission did not take the recommendation of staff. They recommended approval with one exception. The Planning Commission recommends approval of the suggested UDO edits with the exception of the sign separation found in billboards in 3A. So you have two options tonight. You can approve per staff recommendation, or you can approve per Planning Commission recommendation, and then you can always, if you have other edits or concerns, you can make those known, and you can make that part of your amendment.
Thank you, Mrs. Hilton. So we'll go ahead and open up the council, am I right? Mr. Brown, did you want to?
You saw my furrowing brow. Which was the recommendation from the Planning Commission? Was that in the red?
No, it
Oh, it's
would
the back.
stay blue. It would not be, there would be no amendment to the billboard 3A.
So, yeah, so the Planning Commission recommended we not make the policy more liberal as far as spacing, so, yeah. You want to, you can pause on that if you're not ready. I know Mr. Short wanted to discuss this as
Yeah,
well.
well, let Kevin
Okay,
go first,
Mr.
'cause I've
Short?
got some-
I certainly appreciate the economic opportunity that additional billboard signs do present for the cash flow of the city. I am not necessarily opposed in certain areas, but I am very strongly opinionated on a river district along the Creek Turnpike. And the one asset, and I've said this 100 times it seems like, the one asset that we have that no one else has is an east view of the river. And to have a 50-foot sign blocking that view, I can't be tolerant of. And so I struggle with, and maybe there's an amendment that we can add to this, that every location needs to be approved by city council. That would be very acceptable, because there are plenty of places that I don't care what the view is. And I do understand the cash flow, and I do think it does bring economic value for a very extended period of time for the city. And so I'm very cognizant of that. But to leave this language in carte blanche and just allow, the 1,000-foot as the only real governor to the number of signs and and more importantly, the placement of the signs, I can't, I'm not in favor of. So I don't know how we would amend this language to provide for the placement of these signs in the future. Or if we could block out my concern of the river area, the river district area, because we already have two. Again, I'd like to see that be it, so.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Short. Anyone else?
Yeah, I'll
Get
jump
your-
back in. And I share the commissioner's view. I think I've got more concerns along the turnpike, the expressway, because we've got the outlet mall coming in, the development that we're doing. There's so much that we're doing on branding and image right now that if we begin opening that up, the other piece of this, and I doubt that anybody would support me on this, but when we start putting up billboards, once we open that up, we open it up from a commercial standpoint, and we can't control content. And if we want to view as promoting the image of our city, there's certain things that we would not want along that area that's being developed that would not be family friendly that could wind up on a billboard. So I've got some concerns about that as well. If there's a way that we could restrict per sign within that, define that area on the map, and say that any of those will have to come to council for approval specifically, I think I'd be more inclined to go with that.
Mrs. Hilton, given that they would be on city property, do we have a legal right to restrict content, or is that a First Amendment thing? We have zero rights.
If it's on city property, yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah, it's part of the lease.
more nuance than that?
A lot more.
Okay.
This would not only regulate what we own. I mean,
Yeah.
it would allow additional billboards whether we own the property or not.
Okay.
There would
Alright.
be an economic benefit if it's on, if a new billboard is established on city property, but that doesn't mean that other billboards owned by other people could not be built.
Okay. I think we'll, go ahead, ma'am.
If you want me to expand a little bit, even on city property where we open up an expressive forum, we're opening up either a public forum or a limited public forum, and any kind of content distribution is going to be strictly scrutinized and has to have. So generally, Councilor Brown's side, we would have very limited ability to
Okay.
regulate.
Okay, well, we'll go ahead and let Mr. Schraub speak to the economics of the decision.
So, I personally, aesthetically, I may not be a fan of billboards or just signs in general, large signs, but the aquarium has benefited significantly over the last 15 years from having a billboard on their property. There's 3 billboards, one just south of the aquarium, one at the roundabout on the north side of the turnpike, and one closer to CVS, that are all on city property. And what that allows the aquarium to do is basically every single month, they get to choose billboards in the Tulsa metro area, Oklahoma City, or Arkansas, and choose specific locations where they want to have advertising. And so, although there's not a direct cash benefit, there's the benefit of the marketing that the aquarium has. And as it relates to land south of the turnpike, that was my initial thought. If we were to have a mirror image of the 3 billboards on the north side, on the south side, on city property, that would generate between $100,000 and $160,000 a year in revenue with a contract that has been proposed by Whistler, who has the billboards on the north side. And so when, this is particularly pertinent when we're sitting in budget meetings looking at $35 million in capital requests, and we have $4 million to spend this year. And in year 2, we have $50 million in capital requests and $4 million to spend. And we have 5 requested new police officers this year, 5 requested police officers next year, a new vehicle for each one of those officers, outfitting them, plus, you know, the myriad of other requests from departments, and many of these requests supported by council members, in addition to 9 firefighters that we will be hiring based on a grant that expires in 3 years, and we have to come up with the salary and benefits for 9 new firefighters in 3 years. You know, I think that council has been supportive of staff being entrepreneurial in a way as it relates to trying to diversify revenue sources. And although $100,000 to $160,000 doesn't sound like a lot of money on an annual basis, when you look at an all-funds budget of $50 million, $100,000 to $160,000 over a 10-year time span is significant. And even as it relates to individual positions, $100,000 to $160,000 is significant. And so I know I respect the planning decisions, or the planning commission's decision, because they kind of have to look at it from their perspective, which is land use and you know, protecting the aesthetics of the city. And I appreciate Councilor Short's comments and Councilor Brown's comments, but I kind of feel like I have to balance, as the executive of the city, both the aesthetics and the finances, and providing the services that are expected by the citizens. And so I'd be fine with some sort of amendment or even tabling this to have a better language as it relates to the turnpike. But there's other areas of the city, like we have the turnpike and we have Highway 75. Those are really the main areas we're talking about here as it relates to billboards. And from what I've seen, there's really not a whole lot of that. Like if this were to be passed, the main areas this would affect would be the turnpike at the River District and Highway 75 at 121st Street. The city owns property on the, currently owns property on the west side. And so I think that's kind of like the angle we were taking is I think it would be irresponsible at least not to have this discussion about the possibility of potentially having another revenue source. But I fully support, you know, whatever council's decision is as it relates to the turnpike or the whole city, frankly, so.
Yeah. And I can say to us, since we didn't have the luxury of having the paper copies ahead of time, I feel like we're a little bit behind the curve on the billboard decision. As of yesterday, I didn't quite think maybe we were prepared to make a smart choice today. It would be my recommendation to us. I don't have a particular problem with the other 16 dash options that were here, but I think it would be a good idea for us to put this off until the next meeting, and we can give Mr. Shrout more time to kind of talk. By the way, to answer your question, we have all the control. We can have a liberal policy for Highway 75, and we can have a restrictive or a zero tolerance policy for the Creek Highway. So we control this, and ultimately the finances will adjust depending on how we do it. But we can even hand pick where they go, correct? Yeah, we have control over that. So we can take a week or two to think it through and make a better choice if you want.
If we make an amendment, does that have to go back to Planning Commission for approval?
No.
I mean, I'm not talking about one tonight, but if we go back and come back to this body with an amended, we don't have to go through the whole.
No.
Okay.
No, we could have a decision done by the end of April.
Okay, thanks.
Or whenever the next meeting is. So we can hash out a time to meet up at City Hall and figure it out.
It would probably be beneficial too, since we're talking about the creek, if we could actually measure out how many signs would we be potentially talking about if we're looking at the 1,000-foot distance.
We can actually do whatever we want to do. It's up to us, and that's what we have to set the criteria. And I agree with tabling it until we get specifics as to what we all agree on. Because I'm in agreement with Counselor Short, and I also agree with the fact that it is an income, but we have to be smart about it. So.
Real quick, Marseille, can you help refresh my memory? How far does, I think we call it the River District in the UDO? I don't have it committed to memory, sorry. River Tours Commercial, is that RTC?
I think it's the railroad,
To the railroad, okay. Just, okay,
Where's the creek?
the railroad
okay.
and the Creek Turnpike.
Thank you. That gives me some context, thanks.
And you know, in all fairness too, this is a decision that affects everybody that drives into town every day, so it wouldn't hurt to hear from you guys. This is, you're either looking at a big bright sign or we make money. So what would you do if you're in our shoes? It's, we're willing to get your feedback, but the easy thing to do is say there's big bright signs and nobody wants big bright signs. But when that pays for 1.5 firefighters and it costs 0, it's low-lying fruit, he makes a good argument. So those are all the things we need to think about. So you guys want to think about them, let us know what you think.
And again, I really appreciate the entrepreneurial aspect of this and the cash flow generating possibilities. I mean, I'm not ignorant to that piece of this.
Yeah.
It's just, really, my concern is in the RTC, and that's
Gotcha.
it.
No, it's good. How do you guys want to play this number? How do you want to play number 5? You want to do you want the whole thing? You can do whatever you want, Counselor Evans.
I'll make a motion to table number 5.
Second.
Did you get a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a proper motion, a second to table item number 5 to the next available regularly scheduled Jenks City Council meeting. Let's vote, please.
Short.
Yes.
Emmons.
Yes.
Ogier.
Yes.
Murray.
Yes.
Brown.
Yes.
Klein.
Yes.
Mayor Box.
Yes. We'll skip item 6. As a result, moving on to item 7, ordinance 1646, on an ordinance amending the employee retirement system defined contribution plan for the city of Jenks, Oklahoma, providing retirement benefits for eligible employees of the city of Jenks, providing for participant loans, providing for repealer and severability. We're on page 129, and I believe this is you, Mr. Shrout.
Mayor and all members of council, we have a 401A plan that the city contributes 6.8% of employees' salaries to. We also have a 457B plan that employees can contribute to. The IRS allows loans from these plans up to 50% of the value of the vested assets, or $50,000, whichever is, or $50,000, I guess would be the way to say that. And we've been looking at our existing retirement plan, and we'd like to make changes in the upcoming fiscal year, or at least discuss changes. But when we were looking at this, we saw that basically every other community in the area other than Sapulpa, offers loans from the 401A or the 457B accounts of vested balances. So it's basically the employee's money. And we would like to offer this as another benefit to our employees. They would be borrowing from their account and paying back interest to their account. The interest rate is the Wall Street Journal prime rate plus 1%. And so I think our thinking is if employees want to take a loan out from their retirement account, it would be paid back from automatic deductions from their paychecks and at an interest rate that would be going back into their retirement account. And so we view this as a benefit because you could borrow borrow money that you already have that we've paid, and you're paying an interest rate to yourself as opposed to a bank. So this is what we're recommending, and we think that this is kind of the first step in hopefully numerous changes to our retirement system moving forward.
Thank you, Mr. Shrout. Any questions from council? Am I right? Mr. Brown?
Just actually, just one question that came to mind. From a standpoint of the city council, are we all sitting as trustees on this plan? Because typically your trustees are going to have a handful of individuals. I'm not sure that this is actually even within our purview, because typically your 401K, 401A is going to be by your trustees.
So under Oklahoma statutes, the governing body of a municipality establishes the retirement system and the rules associated with that system. Other communities have created a public trust that governs the retirement system, and I mean, we've been exploring, should we create a public trust so that, you know, the funds that we're using are solely for the benefit of the employees, and then that trust would be governed by a separate board that could potentially, instead of council members, be members of the retirement system, so that they could be representing their own interests in these types of decisions. But the way that we've had it set up for decades, to my knowledge, is just following state statute saying we can create a retirement system, but there has to be an ordinance that governs that system, and that's what this is.
Okay, yeah, I appreciate that. I hadn't looked at that particular regulation before. It was on the firefighters pension board, but this is new.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Mr. Short, any question? I think the 401A, the retirement plan is an extremely valuable asset for our employees. Anything that we can do to enhance or further participation in this type of retirement structure is a very good thing. And again, they're paying themselves back with assets that they already have vested, and I'm very supportive.
Thank you, Mr. Short. Any other questions, comments from council? All right, we are on item 7.
I would make a motion that we accept ordinance 1646, amending the employee retirement system.
Second.
Thank you both. Proper motion second, ordinance 1646. Let's vote, please.
Short.
Yes.
Emmons.
Yes.
OJ.
Yes.
Murray.
Yes.
Brown.
Yes.
Klein.
Yes.
Mayor Box.
Yes. Item 8, potential executive session for the purpose of conferring on matters pertaining to economic development, including the transfer of property or the creation of a proposal to entice a business to locate within the city of Jenks where the public disclosure of the matter discussed would interfere with the development of products or services, or if public disclosure would violate the confidentiality of the business. We will be discussing Coal Creek Village along Highway 75 and 121st Street, and we need a motion and a vote to enter executive session.
Make a motion to enter executive session.
Second.
Thank you both. So please.
Short.
Yes.
Emmons.
Yes.
OJ.
Yes.
Murray. Brown.
Yes.
Klein.
Yes.
Mayor Box.
Yes, Ms. Turner, can you join us, please? patience. The time is 7:27. Council has returned from executive session. No votes were cast. Moving on to other business. City Manager's report, Mr. Shrout.
Mayor and members of council, as we are having printer issues, I'm also having computer issues today, and so really the one update I have is the Elm Street project. Chris Cloyd, our city engineer, has been working with our consulting engineer, and we hope to have final bid documents ready for the north half of Elm Street from 121st to 111th, including both intersections and including a trail both along Elm, but also going east on 116th. Hopefully, those will be ready within the next 60 days. So if we go out to bid in June, we would expect to potentially be awarding a contract for this project in July or early August, and then we would anticipate that construction could be starting as soon as September of this year. So we're looking at splitting the north half and the south half because of the property acquisition of Native American land that has been delayed on the south half at 131st on the west side of the road. But that land has been acquired, and now we're just waiting on the utilities to relocate down there. So we think it would be best to get this project on the north half moving instead of waiting on the whole and doing the whole thing at once. So I think that's pretty exciting news. I appreciate Chris Cloyd's work on this, and we hope to have bid documents ready by May and go out to bid in June.
Who did all the clearing on that west side? I noticed there's a lot of trees and stuff have been taken out, and a lot of stuff has been cleaned up on it. Was that the city, or is that?
That would have been the utilities. When they were relocating the power lines or the gas line, they would be clearing all that land.
Okay, thanks.
All right, thank you, Mr. Stroud. Any comments from council? Item number 2. The floor is yours. We didn't have an incog, or anybody going? No? Okay. I had a small outline for a mayor's report, but unfortunately, the doctor's office thing kept me back. I never had time to get it. Wanted to publicly thank Shannon Wilburn and her friend, whose name is unknown, they went out to 111th in the vicinity of the Walmart, and in a couple hours picked up like an ungodly amount of trash. You guys know that all those little white paper bags somehow seem to jump out of the back of people's cars. The groceries stay in the car, but the bag blows over to that fence and they get stuck there like a magnet. So appreciate you, Shannon, for making that effort, and we'll work on seeing if we can get the community more involved to do volunteer things like that in the near future. Interestingly enough, today there's a business school at ORU, and the name escapes me at the moment. I do have a picture of it in my phone, but ORU does have a business school, and they signed a memorandum of understanding today with a company called Redline, which is an aerospace company, and it's actually kind of cool. They rent, I don't know if they rent, but they have space on the International Space Station, and they are doing some interesting research into developing medical treatments and cures that can only be really developed in zero gravity. So here on Earth, it's difficult to create certain things with the gravity that we have, but they're finding that they can do 3D printing, like for a meniscus or a patella or bones. They can do it in space on a 3D printer, and with that different kind of gravity that those things hold together, where here on the surface of Earth are very difficult to reproduce. So they're having a lot of really cool results, and they decided to partner with ORU to be a research center for going forward. So it's pretty cool for not only for the campus, for those of you guys that are alumni, but for the city of Tulsa to get that effort. So if you see anything about that in the news, that was former NASA Administrator Bridenstine and former Congressman Bridenstine who led that effort today. So you may see something about that, but thought that was worth sharing from a for you science geeks out there. And that is all I have. If not, we will go ahead and call the city council meeting adjourned at 7:32 PM. And we will call to order the regularly scheduled meeting of the Jenks Public Works Authority. Roll call, please.
Short.
Here.
Emmons. Here. Ogier.
Here.
Murray. Here. Brown.
Here.
Klein. Present. Chairbox.
Here. Item number 1, consideration and appropriate action relating to our consent agenda. Any items anybody cares to discuss?
I think, looking at item F, if we could go ahead and pull that simply because it relates with items 3 and 4. Discuss them to end. Is it possible? Good with that?
The parking lot?
Yeah, and move it on the agenda so they're all together.
Well, do you want to move them all together or just pull it off and discuss it on its own?
We could do that.
Okay. If you can make an official motion, that'd be
I
great.
make that motion. We pull item F.
Second.
Thank you much. Motion to remove item F for further discussion. Let's vote on item 1 with the exception of F, please.
Short.
Yes.
Emmons.
Yes.
Ogier.
Yes.
Murray.
Yes.
Brown.
Yes?
Klein. Yes. Chairbox.
Yes. Item 2 is now item F of the consent agenda. Item F is the approve the purchase of material for the construction of a temporary parking lot and driveway improvements to be built by Tulsa County at the city property located northwest of the 106th Street and Elm Street intersection for a total cost of $137,126. Funding for the same to be provided by a supplemental appropriation to account 532525392, known as City Facilities, Building and Improvements. This is page 142, if you are following along, and I believe Mr. Shroud is ready to discuss.
Mayor and members of council, we partner with Tulsa County usually on an annual or semi-annual basis to provide largely asphalt improvements, whether it's on streets or parking lots. We've partnered with them on Park West. We've partnered with them on 141st Street, 131st Street, 121st Street. And the arrangement is we purchase the material and Tulsa County then performs the work. In this case, we have a facility on the ranch property, a 10,000 square foot building that we're hoping to have events similar to events that we have at the Hive. The fire marshal has identified the need for a sprinkler system. Right now, we can only have up to 49 people in the building. So right now, the chamber is officing there and holding small meetings and conferences. But the parking situation is limited. There's not enough parking. In addition, the drive, the second half of the drive on the western part of the property needs to be upgraded. And so we sat around originally and were thinking about permanent parking and permanent access to this site, but because we're still waiting on the OTA to provide us with a dollar figure for either purchasing or leasing their 250 acres west of the Creek Turnpike, we thought it would be best to fund the sprinkler system at this gym building, fund a temporary parking lot, keep the existing ingress and egress to the ranch, and see just how this works using this facility as an event facility before making permanent decisions. We thought about, do we have to put in some sort of asphalt parking? We thought about just using the grass, but with people, if people are coming from work and they're going to an event, whether it's a Jenks Chamber lunch or otherwise, do men and women coming from work want to walk through grass if it's potentially wet, muddy? No. So we thought about gravel. And I think similarly, people don't really want to walk across a gravel parking lot in dress shoes or high heels. And so we decided that this would be the most cost-effective way to do a temporary parking lot. would be to partner with Tulsa County, where we just buy the material, they provide the labor, and have, I believe it's, let's call it 120 spaces. We recognize that long-term, we're going to need potentially 20 to 25 more spaces, but this is really just a test to see how this goes with the organization managing the building, being the chamber, and the neighbors, and also the ingress and egress off of Elm and 106th Street. And I think this will better inform our planning, which will include all stakeholders involved, once we know what we can do with the OTA property, if we can access that, and what potential other improvements we may make to the ranch property. But I think it's premature to spend the money building a permanent parking lot with islands, landscaping, irrigation, curb and gutter and all that. So we are just proposing putting parking spots out there, using the facility once we get the sprinkler system in, and seeing how that goes. We think that provides us the most flexibility. And so that's what you have before you with item F, 3, and 4. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Stroud. Any questions from council? Am I right, Mr. Brown?
Yeah, and I'll just kind of jump in, and I appreciate the way you presented that as well, for the benefit of the rest of the council, just to kind of weigh in so you'll know why I had questions on this. I did have a chance to meet with Chris, members of the staff, and initially concerns I had were going asphalt compared to our normal standards on curb, guttering, concrete, and the normal long-term things that we would look at from a planning standpoint. Other concerns that I'd presented to the staff that I got some really solid answers back. My understanding, again, dealing with potential flooding of that space, and our city engineer, I understand, has evaluated the flooding aspect or where that stands on that particular site. We look back to 2019 to determine that as a benchmark as to whether or not the site would flood from previous evaluations. So that was a concern that I had. Also, because we are talking about the construction, widening, and activities that are happening on Elm, other discussions we've had about the intersection at 106th and what may develop there, again, was looking at ingress, egress, how that would impact any potential changes that we've talked about there, to make sure that we're not doing things that might impair the flow of traffic in that particular area. Again, there were some great suggestions that the city staff are already looking at to resolve any potential issues that we might have that would impair traffic flow. So I felt like we had some good responses. And then what Chris has said from a standpoint of looking at the other property to the west, I think the other thing I was looking at was from a strategic standpoint, long-term, going back to a real estate perspective, location, location, location. Do we want to build out a permanent facility in this area? But until we resolve the access to the land to the west and to know how all of that's going to turn out, anything we do there right now, and he used the term temporary, I think it is a temporary solution. The asphalt does not provide a huge impact on the financial status to do that. So partnering with the county, it does make sense to do a temporary solution so that we can at least get the use out of the facility until we can make some long-term decisions. And then the other piece of that as well, when we start talking about an event center, concern I had was, are we looking at something that's going to be big enough for not only the chamber, but senior citizens or other organizations within the community that would be looking at a facility that might be needed? And is an event center something we want to do just for local, or do we want to try to use it to bring venues into the city? So that brings back to more of a long-term discussion of, is this what we want to build, and is that the location? And clearly, with all the other development activities we've got going on right now, to build a center of that scope, we're not in the fiscal capacity to do that until we get some other projects moving. So I think from a temporary standpoint, I felt comfortable with the answers that I got out of city staff and the city manager on that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Brown. Anyone else? Are you guys aware of when we talk about the OTA property to the west, everybody know what we're talking about? We've all been briefed, okay. I would agree. We gotta have a place for people to park, and frankly, there's so many moving parts and so many balls in the air to juggle right now with whatever's going on the east side of the road and the west side of the road. And I personally envision Jenks in 10 years. I can't imagine that's the event space. That's not ever going to be, that property is never going to, I don't see it being congested that way. I see a future convention center somewhere over near the river in 10 years, but I certainly don't see it happening there. So I would agree that the word temporary kind of threw me, throwing money at a temporary solution, but I don't really think we have another option. So I agree with Mr. Brown's assessment, and I would be supportive as well. Anything else, Mr. Shrout? Last call for council.
Is, in discussing
Murray?
this, you said this is F3 and 4, and Mr. Schauber mentioned the fact about the sprinkler system. Is the sprinkler system amount separate from this also?
Yes.
Or is that, okay,
Yeah.
so this is strictly the
Parking lot.
paving of the parking lot and the road end?
Yeah.
Okay, I want to make sure that I understood that part.
Absolutely. Good question. Anyone else? Last call? All right, if there's nothing else on item F, we can entertain an option to move forward.
Motion to approve is presented.
Second. No. Motion.
Gonna open it up to the floor.
Do you want to open up to the public?
Well, we can, but there's really, that's not, we normally would, but if you'd like to speak on it, yeah, by all means. We'll close the floor to council, and we'll open up to the floor briefly, if we may.
Charlotte Montgomery, 10612 South Burke
Good
Avenue.
evening.
I don't have a problem with the parking lot. I don't specifically have a problem with it being used as an event center. I did notice, and I figured it was very important, the term temporary. Well, what does temporary mean? Is that a year, 5 years, 10 years? If it's 10 years, that's not temporary. And where I really had the hard time with how this is proposed is that I did leave a message for the city engineer. I did not hear back from him. I left a message with Marseille. She calls me and she says, "What parking lot?" She didn't have any answers for me. And whether it's temporary or permanent, the UDO is specific in the section 16.6 that the person who determines the use and therefore calculates the number of spaces is the city planner. I mean, I counted it like 15 times in that section where it's the city planner who determines that. So I don't even know how you derived 125 spaces. Are you, I have to make assumptions. Were you using government uses indoor? Were you using place of assembly? How much of the space was professional office? I mean, it makes a huge difference. If you're using government uses indoor to calculate those spaces, it is specific in that table that has all the uses with the space per square foot, that it has to be addressed by the planning commission. She doesn't even get to see it. So the problem I'm having with what you're presenting is that you didn't have the person who was supposed to determine what the uses were, and therefore the appropriate parking spaces is 125 appropriate for what you're going to be using it for. And no one can answer for me how you derived 125. If I take a look at what the estimated square footage is, and I just made some assumptions about office space and the assembly area, you need 275 required spaces. If you use only 125, you're reducing the parking requirement by 55%. But no one can tell me how you derive that number. That's what I'm having the problem with. Also, whether it's temporary or permanent, there are certain things you have to have, and I didn't see a notation, I didn't see an arrow, I didn't see a little drawing where it addressed, you have to have for off-street parking, off-street bicycle parking designated.
That's a requirement in that section. They have a whole paragraph on it. They also require off-street loading berth. There is no loading berth in this place that you're going to hold events. They're going to be hauling equipment in, tables, chairs, food. You have to have a loading berth for that. There's also no dedicated area for off-street trash receptacles and screening. No place on there. You look at all the little diagrams you got. There's no little X's like how the city planner usually does her diagrams, where you can clearly see where all the receptacles are, and you see where there's a little drawing that there's screening. There's nothing there for an offloading berth. You're missing some holes here. I don't have a problem with you doing it. As a matter of fact, the fact that you're doing it for the price that you can get it at, oh, right, do more of that. I cannot believe the price you're getting that done with. I'm kind of like going, why didn't you do that at 2nd and A Street? Because you only get 29 parking places there at 217. You're getting 125 for $177,000 in total. Wow, keep doing more of that. But I want to know that that the city follows the UDO. You are not exempt because you are the city from following the UDO. And it is specific. It says there, like I said, like 15 times, the person who determines the use and can waive parking requirements, city planner. That's the only person that can waive that. Those are my comments.
Hey, but what specific questions? I was trying to keep up.
Okay.
The first one I thought you had was, how did we get to 125?
Yes.
Okay.
And then my other comments is, how did you get to 125, but what was the uses so that you got to that?
Okay.
And then you don't have, you have not identified where you're going to have off-street bicycle parking, and that's a requirement. in the
Bicycles.
UDO.
Okay.
You also have not
Loading ramp.
designated off-street loading berth,
Loading.
and you have not identified off-street trash receptacles and screening.
Okay.
And
Why don't we,
And if I could just mention, we're trying to be transparent by providing all of this information, but at the end of the day, this is a appropriation to build something that we can have all of these questions answered. We don't have a timeline necessarily on when Tulsa County can build this. We don't have a timeline on when we will have the sprinkler system approved. And so it's difficult for us to say, right now, you can have 49 people in the building. So it may be a 10,000 or 12,000 square foot building. It's leased to the chamber, and they can only have up to 49 people in the building, even though the building size is significantly larger. So it's tough to know until we have it sprinkled, until we understand how it's going to be used, how many spaces we may need. We wanted to, the whole purpose of this agreement and the appropriation, when we have an agreement with Tulsa County, we may have an agreement in April, and they may not get to it for another year. And so our goal was to get this on as quickly as we possibly can, to basically, we're not on the list for Tulsa County until we have an agreement. And so I appreciate all of the comments and the questions, and I think those are good to point out. I think the main goal with these agenda items is, can we just get on the list to have this project done sometime in the future? And I mean, I think that we've internally been talking, depending on what Tulsa County can tell us, because sometimes they don't even have an answer on when they can do a project. We've thought about, in our budget discussions with the Public Works Department, they want to purchase some equipment that would allow us to actually start building parking lots like this, or laying asphalt like this. And so, I mean, even at this moment, I'm not certain that Tulsa County would be doing this, or we'd just be purchasing the material to potentially do it in the future. So I appreciate all the comments, and I think that, that's good feedback, and we'll take that with us, and we can, the 125, I don't know off the top of my head, but we can get back to you on that, and maybe these plans are altered in some way, but I think the reason that there may not be an explanation for some of this is we just wanted to get this approved so that we can get on Tulsa County's schedule.
Well, let's be more realistic here. This is a temporary parking lot, so let's just be honest with each other. Do we have to follow the rules for something that's temporary? And I can also understand her point that if temporary turns into 5 years, are we doing the right thing? So I think the 125 was an arbitrary number engineering came up with based on typical attendance. Is that safe to say it was just a reasonable number that?
Probably.
Probably based on affordability?
And it's, this is probably partially my fault in that I think about, we have temporary roads on Main Street right now as we speak. The contractor lays asphalt because they're doing work on the north side of Main in between Elm and the railroad tracks. Everybody drives on it for a period of time. Then they move to the south side or vice versa and lay a temporary road. And I think that my direction to staff was, can we just get a temporary parking lot on the site for a decent price so that we can have something going while we're trying to figure out if we have the ODA or the OTA property.
I understand that. However, if you put yourself, if you're not above the UDO, which you are not, if this was another business and they came to you and they said, hey, we don't know exactly how we're going to build out everything, but we're going to have some sort of an operation in this space that we're having until we get up and going. And we just want to do a temporary parking lot. That would go through this person here. Just because it's temporary doesn't mean you get to have the privilege to not follow the UDO. It is specific. Those parking places have to be determined by the city planner. And that's what I'm saying is that, what is temporary? If you tell me, and you can't say that parking lot won't be there in another 5 or 10 years. You can't. So it needs to go back through the process. And if this was any other business coming through the regular doors here at City Hall, it would have gone through the planning department.
Well, I view if it's temporary, we have temporary parking all the time when there's some sort of project being developed, and they may park in gravel, they may park on grass for years while they're developing a project, and we don't have an inside, if you look at the Simon project, people have been parking down there for over 5 years now. I still consider it temporary because, the project is just taken longer than it should, but I kind of look at this, like there's so many, I think the mayor brought up, there's so many moving pieces related to the property, and we just want to be able to utilize one building. I kind of view the whole property as one project, and the permanent parking is dependent on, if we find out in a month that OTA says, nope, you can't use this 250 acres, okay, well, that's going to affect our permanent development, of whatever the ranch property is, and the parking. And so maybe we're relying on temporary too much, but I really do view it as, this is one big project. We just want to use one piece of it in the short term. So can we lay some asphalt in an inexpensive manner so that once we know the other moving pieces, like, are we going to have it sprinkled? Because that's something that's going to have to be approved by council. If it's not approved by council, there's only 49 people that are going to be in that building until it's sprinkled. And so then we wouldn't need more than 125 spaces. But maybe we use the remainder of the ranch property for a pumpkin patch or a Christmas tree sales or something else that would affect the amount of parking needed. And so I just think it's premature to make, just like I thought it was premature to make a final decision on a permanent parking, I think it's premature to say how many parking spaces we need when I look at this property as one project, and there's so many factors and information that we don't have yet.
I have to disagree with you, Mr. Schropp. The parking that is going on right now with the workers over at the outlet mall, you know that there's a finite time. It's going to end this summer. You have no time frame of when this temporary parking lot will be decided if it's too much, too little, expand it, move it, or whatever. So I don't think that's a fair comparison. And you've also stated that you're going to use that, you don't want to see people in their shoes walking across the grass, so you're going to have some type of event there. And so it's not like temporary, like a work crew going out there for a couple of months until he installed all the plumbing. What I am saying is that there are requirements for reasons why things go through the planning department. Even with parking, you still have to meet certain things with a temporary parking. And if you're going to have people using that for events in any way, you need to have striping. You know, you're probably going to need to have lighting. That goes back to this department. And all I'm asking you is build the parking lot, but make sure you follow the same rules that you would require of some other business that came in and said, hey, look, I have a building. I don't know exactly how I'm going to use the whole thing. I hope to fill it up, but I need some more parking. You know, there's certain questions I have to answer to, and it has to satisfy the planning director. And that's what I'm asking you to do, is to check the boxes and don't think that you're above the UDO.
Let me ask you a question, Ms. Montgomery. If this had been brought forward by her with these same recommendations, and we followed the process,
I wouldn't say a thing.
you and I will agree with you to
Now,
some...
I may have called her and asked some questions, but I wouldn't be up here because she is so good. What I was missing when I was looking through this, she always provides you guys with a little spreadsheet that says, these are the uses it's going to be. Here's the square footage per parking space that's needed. It comes to this. Oh, if it's a PUD, I'm going to allow this much, but if it's straight zoning, oh, I'm willing to agree to this. She gives you a spreadsheet, and she tells you, look, we're going to have the lighting, that will all be taken care of. There's going to be striping, curbing, whatever else. Where's the trash receptacle going to be located? It's always there, and it's not on this. All I'm asking you to do is to check the boxes, and don't think that just because this is what you view as very temporary, that you're not subject to the UDO. I want you to go ahead and build it, especially for that price. But there's certain things that need to be followed. There is a progression. And there's no reason why you can't come back in 2 weeks and say, hey, look, you know, really all we need is a temporary parking place to accommodate 49 people because we don't know until we get these other bids in. You come back later and you ask for more money to build a bigger parking lot.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, the only thing that concerns me, I know how the county works. I have the relationships, he does. That's, yeah, we will be pushed off into oblivion if we make any changes. I would agree with you one thing. I think what's happened here, the problem here was a lack of communication in this building, and we can fix that. And I'm not blaming anybody, but it seems to be that maybe that happened, so we can talk about that. But I would tell you that when I first saw this, as soon as I saw the word temporary, my mind just went to, well, it's temporary. Let's just get what we need to get. It's a cheap Band-Aid that has to happen to stop some bleeding right now. So, and you know, when we talk about events, we're not talking about proms. I think we're talking about the same things that are currently happening at the chamber, the Hive, at some point being able to shift those over to the ranch, because there obviously is increasing pressures for parking, and not to mention there's a person interested in buying the property. So there's so much happening here. I think I'll be very honest with you, and publicly speaking, I saw the word temper and I figured, let's just get this done. You're right, and I don't know that most of us, and it doesn't surprise me that you do, jump right to the UDO and double check all those boxes, because in my mind, I see this as asphalt that's going to sustain cars and the weight of 100+ cars for as long as we need it to, and this is a much better solution than the cost of building a concrete parking lot, which I don't know that we can do right now. So agree with you on just about everything, but I want you to know where, at least specifically for me, and I only get one vote, that word temporary to me just kind of made me feel like, let's just get on with this. But I also don't want to, telling you guys now that you push this off too far, and just like getting the attention of the engineers for ODOT and OTA, we're on their 8-year plan. We need to be on their 2-year plan. And Mr. Schraub's right, if we don't get the attention of Commissioner Keith or Dunkley right now, with a solid project that's clearly defined, we could just end up, they could divert their attention and start paying attention to Sand Springs or anyone else. So I would be highly motivated to get this done. But I also agree with your point, and it's, we need to get our, we
And
need
you
to
realize
dotted i's and cross t's for sure. I
There are
appreciate
those
that.
other things too that have to be in there. If you're going to have events, I mean, and you have to, but the last thing you want to do is to not plan for where you're going to have a birthing area, and there you have parking spots. You have to tear up the asphalt and you have to do the work again. That's my point, is I don't feel it, not all, I'm not seeing the boxes checked off like how it should. And if it was a business coming to you, you would be asking for the same things, whether it was temporary or permanent, and it would have to come through the planning department. You have not checked off all the boxes. That's all I'm asking. And whether it's temporary or permanent, there are certain things that have to be met. It's not on what has been submitted. I don't want you to lose out on a deal, but you still got to check off the boxes. You did not do that.
Mr. Mayor, if I could interject, and the thing that, again, flipped the switch for me on this was when I looked at the agenda item and then having a conversation, and we talked about the temporary nature of this, my realization or my understanding is that this was an appropriations.
It is.
It's an appropriations, and I would have to defer to our planner, which is to say, what is the triggering event? Not an appropriations, but what's the triggering event that would normally then bring it to the planning department to say, what do we have to do to sign off on in order to make sure that we're conforming with all the requirements that we stipulate for everyone else? And I think if the goal is to clear the appropriations so that we can get on the schedule, then what are the triggering events then that our city planner needs to say, now we need to come through to say, is this just a resurfacing of an existing area, or do we have to begin looking at how do we define temporary for, like a temporary use permit? What's the temporary definitions in the UDO? Or do we have to go ahead and go through with measuring the width of the road, the number of spaces, and all of the other things that we would normally put into any type of facility that's going to be utilized for commercial purposes? So I don't think we've hit the triggering event
Okay,
yet.
well, that's a very good point, maybe, that we should have explained a long time ago. Would somebody on staff please explain to us the process so that the public understands that if this isn't just indeed appropriation, which appears to be, how about we just answer this question? Is at some point, if we approve this appropriation, does it come back to you guys, and are you going to discuss this internally, and will she come forward and make this recommendation anyway? Is that how this process?
So I said earlier, again, this is just an appropriation, approving the agreement to get on the list. We don't know when, if this is going to happen in a year, 2 years. And, you know, when we budget, when we go through the budget, we appropriate money for all sorts of things that still require a significant amount of review. We're just saying, we're getting the council to say this is a policy decision of council, that we want a parking lot here, and generally to spend this amount of money, and we want to enter an agreement with Tulsa County to build a parking lot. We still have abundant time to review, you know, maybe in that time frame, the building is sprinkled, maybe it's not sprinkled, maybe we hear from OTA and plans change. We're just getting on the list, and I'm not saying, I think if we would have just come without any number of spaces, but just an estimate, we wouldn't even be having this discussion. It's that, you know, I think the engineer went above and beyond to provide what we've been working on, but that's not the final, you know, that may not be the final design, that may not be the final plan, and if there's something that we need to do, before then, we will do it.
Okay, I think Ms. Montgomery's
yes.
tracking.
Yeah.
Good
Yes,
question,
I'm
Mr.
tracking
Brown.
that.
Yep, your question brought us all back together. I think,
And
I know
would
you
like to
understand now. This is a question of, often the public doesn't understand the dance and the routine that we go through. These little things take months, and I think now you.
I understand the appropriation. What shouldn't have happened, it should have been all the attachments that went with that, because that told me that that's what was going to get built.
Yeah, and I
That goes-
suspect after we approve this appropriation, which I hope we do, we can get all your questions answered about what she thinks of the parking lot
Yeah, my
afterwards.
expectation would be that this
Yeah.
will be coming back
Yeah.
before a shovel is turned.
Is that true?
It may or may not have to.
May or may not have to.
Yeah.
Well, we may not even build this parking lot. Yeah, may not happen. So with all these other triggering events, if that OTA property comes in and the city and our residents are willing to make a stab at ownership of that, and we decide we need to build a road underneath the Creek Highway to get from here to future park, whatever it is, we don't know, then we don't know. But for right now, I think, I just want you to know, because we talk a lot. Temporary was the trigger word for me. And then, and I kind of also know how he feels about if we don't get the money appropriated, the county won't even pay attention to us. That's a safe assumption. So we're kind of wrangling that aspect of it too, but in the future, we're just going to move money from one pot to the other, but in the
And
future.
don't attach the drawings that let us believe that that's what's going to get done, unless it goes through her,
Lessons learned.
okay?
We're in agreement. We have to follow, we got to
Yeah.
follow the.
Yeah, you're right, you're right.
we have
But
to
to your
follow
point
the-
too, and I was thinking about, would we allow some restaurant to do this? The answer is no.
No.
But devil's advocate though, just because it's you and me talking here. On the ranch, there's no public safety problem. We don't have 500 cars going in and out of their day. For right now, even though the city owns it and it's a public space, she and her team drive in and some construction workers drive in. So we don't necessarily see it as some place we really have to protect the public and make sure the UDO is enforced, because it's kind of just a private little space for her and her team to go in and out. So I want you to understand, as just humans who kind of are looking at this from that perspective, we see it a little bit differently. But to John's point, yeah, you're right. We have to play by the same rules everybody else does. And when we do build it right out of concrete and rebar and curbs, we will play by the rules, and you can be on our parking lot committee if you want.
Okay, you know I will be. So is there any chance to get any more of that cheap asphalt for the place at A and Second Street?
Where?
Perhaps,
The what?
perhaps.
Where?
At A and Second, 8th Street and Second Street?
But I just want to clarify. All we're
What'd you
doing
say?
is appropriating the money.
Not on the agenda.
My city attorney is
Good call,
advising us to
good call.
not, and not promise you any more asphalt. Unless you need your driveway redone, we can talk about that at a later date. Thank you, Ms. Montgomery. Double whammy. Good evening,
I have
sir.
different ones. Keith Montgomery, 10612 South Fir Avenue.
Are y'all related? I'm just kidding.
To who? No. Just a comment, I think the word temporary misled a lot of people. Because the reality is, if you build it, most likely, you may just build more and still use the darn thing. Because when I looked at how they were building it, it looked pretty standard. You know, about how much underlay you're doing, how thick the asphalt is, so forth and so on. But so with that, you know, my concern is the budget really the right number? Well, it covers that cost, but unless you're gonna build it and say, we're only gonna do events during the day, you're gonna need to do electrical and you're gonna need to do lighting. So you need to think about those kinds of things when you're building it, because otherwise, you know, you're gonna have a liability risk of people tripping over themselves in the dark if you're trying to do an event at 7, 8 o'clock at night and there's no lights. You're probably also going to want some kind of a sidewalk. So, you know, it's part of appropriation. You need to approve it. It's a great deal. The price sounds good. But be sure you know what the full price is going to be. Because there are other things that bluntly you're going to need to do. And just put it all up front. just don't try to keep changing things. Just put it all up front, and that way you don't have to do it twice. Because I think temporary means we may need more, we may need less, depending on what the use is. You are going to get, already laid the water line, you're going to get the sprinklers at some point, because without that, you really don't have the facility's usability to where you want it. So, the reality is, probably that lot's going to stay there. So, if it takes more money to get it right, do it right. So.
Thank you, Mr. Montgomery. You guys came back from Australia fired up, huh? New Zealand or wherever you were.
Good evening. Catherine Lenhart, 777, I can never get this right, West 106th Street, Jenks. Well, I would agree with my neighbors that the site plan is usually reflective of a desired use. So you're saying a temporary spot, but it's really indicating long-term use of space, and you specified for events. So I had the same concern that this is an arbitrary dollar amount that you're asking for if it's an arbitrary number of spots that isn't based in fact. So I just really wanted to understand, too, the clarification of the widening of the Elm Peoria entrance, because same thing, how is that determined? Was that by police and fire saying we needed a direct line? I mean, it goes to the money because there's obviously some thought that dictated that design. So I'm just curious about how that was determined that's all that's necessary, because there is a public safety concern if you're outletting onto 106th, or if you're holding these events and our neighbors are walking down 106th to access them. So I just wanted a better understanding of that, that allows for that dollar amount.
So can you give us a specific question, and we'll let Chris
Well, the
tackle.
specific question is that widening determined on public fire safety, police access, or how was that deemed, that that's all that was required, I guess?
The widening of Peoria Elm?
The entrance and exit, would it be solely an entrance, or is it now an entrance and exit? Is that the same line item, or is
That's
it kind
not
of
a-
all combined?
Do you want to kick that? That's not an item.
I know the issue with Elm, with the entrance, is if you're headed southbound and you take a right into the ranch property, you immediately have to do a U-turn, and you're pointed north, and then you have to point west. And for fire trucks, if there was a situation where they needed to enter at that angle, it's very difficult,
Right,
if
I
not
understand.
impossible. And so the idea was, how can we straighten this out so that a fire truck, if needed, can just enter and not have to do a U-turn, a super short U-turn. In the parking, we just come up with a number for the quantity of materials that we think we will need to accomplish a parking lot of a certain amount of spaces, plus or minus however many. And if my memory serves me correct, almost every single project we do with Tulsa County, we have an estimate, we have an agreement with them, and depending on the project, we need more, it's usually more, quantity of the material than what we had originally had a contract with them for. We come back and do a change order or get the council to approve the additional amount. We did parking lot, we paved Park West as a part of, I think, the very first project for Vision 2025 extension back in 2016. That's a huge space. It was gravel. We estimated how much we would need. And I think we said we thought it would be $200,000. I think it was more than that. We came back to council at that time, got approval. Same is true for, I believe, 141st, 31st, 121st. I think they've done work on 121st from Elm through the bend in the road there to the east when we chip sealed it originally. And so
Well, no, basically, from the parking lot to Elm, there's that widening. So That's just to allow for,
A fire truck has to have
Right.
technically 20 feet.
but have you modified it to be an entrance and an exit, or will the entrance still be at Elm Peoria and the exit on 106th?
I think it's still exit on 106
like
at the
that?
moment, yeah.
Okay, so that's
And-
what I've,
Yeah, and again, this is just kind of a test case. Let's see how it goes. We want your input, we want your neighbors' input on what do we want this thing to be long-term? Like, how do we want people to enter and exit, but not knowing if we're gonna have access to the OTA, because if we don't, like, there's gonna be a lot less uses for through traffic into, you know what I mean? There's gonna be just less people. And I don't know what the plan is for the balance of the ranch property. I mean, we talked about it being open space, we talked about it being park space. What does that mean? Are there trails? Is there a playground? Are there tennis courts? Is there, it's just kind of wide open. Do we want access to Polecat Creek? Is Polecat Creek safe to have access to? I mean, there's just so many different options that we have, and I guess I'm just looking at how can we start using this building for more than just even to have chamber lunches, because right now we can't even have a chamber lunch there because we can only have 49 people, and
yeah, no, the opportunity for citizens to have access to this building for events, community events, is very promising. I mean, so maybe I should have clarified that from the beginning. It's just, of course, we think through some of the issues that have been going on at that intersection, and, I'm just curious, like in the last year, then, have any new traffic studies been done, or new traffic solutions been explored to increase the flow of traffic at that intersection? Like this little bit of incremental arbitrary number for a parking space, you're saying you're going to do long-term events, so that's the kind of thinking that people are able to get to. So this brings up a good question, and I'm glad Montgomery's brought it up too, about just the planning and concept of a space, whether it be temporary, but you're saying actually for a long-term use. So that's where we're just understanding that cost and what is factored into the components that make that happen. So it was good.
yeah, I mean, I'll
Good
give you another
explanation.
example. The city spent, JPWA spent $750,000 to renovate the Hive and put in new asphalt and everything, with the idea that this is gonna be an art place, and there's gonna be artists, and there's gonna be this, that, and the other, and that never came to fruition. But the city spent the money, and sure, we got some office space out of it. It's been an asset to the community, and it's probably been worth it. But the idea that some people have going into a project and how something's going to be used, what I find is often something's different than the original intent, and that could be for any number of reasons. And so the only intent here was just to try this out on a temporary basis,
Yeah.
out of an abundance of caution, because we get, because people say they want transparency. I think Chris was trying to be helpful by providing this layout, and then it turns into a problem, so.
I wouldn't see a problem. I think people just are inquiring the components of what that site plan for desired use meant. So we just asked for clarification on that. So it's just inquiry-based questions. I mean, people, you can imagine, ask me a lot of questions about it. So it's nice to have this kind of dialogue, even if this is probably technically in appropriations, because it just diffuses. And as we learned at the city strategic session, one of the ways that your community can build confidence in you is through information and dialogue. So that's what we're doing.
Yeah, I agree, and I'm glad this is not typically an agenda item we would open to the public.
And I appreciate that.
Yeah,
I've listened
absolutely.
to the OMAG, and I kind of heard your view on what a public comment is, so I appreciate that in light of
Well, there's
that
my
thought
view, but
process.
every time I think I have a viewpoint, I have a lawyer tell me that I'm wrong. So I'm just trying to do what I'm told and not get in trouble. We get 8 hours of training when we get elected, and the majority of the discussion is, let me tell you the 101 ways you're going to get sued and how the
Right.
public's going to screw you.
Right.
for doing nothing. So, yeah, so we kind of come into this like, well,
Well, it's a difference between
Yeah.
trying to hold someone accountable, but then
Yeah.
just trying to put things in context too, and not
Sure.
just be hardlined on whatever that dollar amount is, or you know,
Yeah.
something like that. It's,
and I'll even say these two things because you kind of talked about them, but we're off the discussion on F, which was merely an appropriation, but there has been discussion, and he brought it up the other day, of if you're traveling south on Peoria Elm and you cross the bridge and you start to see the ranch, it doesn't make a lot of sense in the long-term future. I'm just a resident talking right now. I don't see how it makes a lot of sense to and then do all those little
oh,
herky-jerky
right,
turns.
I've done it before.
So as I drive down the road, I can almost imagine a new lane that we build. Of course, it's got to go down into that valley and come up again. But all of those things are buildable, right, Mr. Carr? Of course, they just need money.
Just costs money.
So, that's my simplistic view, is I see a future of a lane there that gets the people traveling to the ranch out of our way so we can continue to go home. And that doesn't impede that flow of traffic, and not to mention the public safety aspect. I will also tell you, and it's probably, I don't know if it's going to go anywhere, but there has been some discussions of a significant improvements to 106 and Peoria Elm.
Like a double diamond or something
No, we don't
else?
like diamonds. We're more interested, I think we like the princess cut, or round. We're into round diamonds. Round diamonds.
Round.
Round diamonds look a little bit better for that.
Round.
Do I know if that's going to happen? I don't know. I do agree that to some sense, it seems like it, on the surface, it makes sense from a safety perspective, but, like to the point he made earlier, where do we get the money for all these things is really what it's going to come down to.
Right.
Because ultimately, I think our number one responsibility to you is public safety. And to me, that means roads, police, and fire. And so we definitely have a lot of work to do there. But those were the two things that I wanted to share with you and to anybody who's listening that have been in some preliminary surface level discussions that may or may not materialize or go deeper. But if they do, we will certainly let you know. Because
Sounds
guess
great.
what? It affects me, it affects him, and
Yeah.
who else lives over there?
It affects a lot of people
Yeah,
down
affects a
Elm.
lot of people, yeah, everybody,
Yeah.
so.
At least we're not doing gates again. Okay.
Thank you, yes, ma'am. Okay, we will close the floor to the public. I'm assuming nobody else wants to speak on item F. All right. We are back to item F, back to the council. This is an appropriation request, so we can get on the radar of Tulsa County and get some consideration for a project with them, hopefully at some point soon. Is there any motions on the floor?
Motion to approve item F.
Second.
Thank you very much. We have a proper motion and a second on item F. Let's vote, please.
Short.
Yes.
Emmons.
Yes.
OJ.
Yes.
Murray.
Yes.
Brown.
Yes.
Klein.
Yes.
Chairbox.
Yes. Okay, moving on to item 3. In an interlocal agreement with Tulsa County for providing labor and equipment to install a parking lot and driveway improvements on the city's property located at northwest corner of 106th and Elm, the amount of $39,930, and authorize the mayor to execute a document funding the same to be paid by a supplemental appropriation to account 532525392, also known as the City Facilities Building and Improvements Fund, page 150 in the packet. Any other questions related to item 3 from council on my right? Council on the left. Any other questions? Last call. Okay. Item 3, please.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Thank you, Welch. We have a motion and a second. Item 3, let's vote, please.
Short.
Yes.
Emmons.
Yes.
OJ.
Yes.
Murray.
Yes.
Brown.
Yes.
Klein.
Yes.
Chairbox.
Yes, sir. Item 4 is Resolution 2024-01, a resolution amending the annual appropriation by $177,056 in account number 53525392, also known as Buildings and Improvements, for the fiscal year ending in June 30th of 2024, to fund the interlocal agreement with Tulsa County for parking lot and driveway improvements to city property near 106th Street and Elm Street, along with paving materials. Last call from council. Questions on my right? Questions on my left? Very well.
I make a motion as written,
Second.
to approve as written.
Okay, thank you. We have a proper motion and a second on item 4. Let's vote, please.
Short.
Yes.
Emmons.
Yes.
OJ.
Yes.
Murray.
Yes.
Brown.
Yes?
Klein.
Yes.
Chair Box.
Yes, last call for council. Closing comments, anybody? Mr. Shroud, anything from you, sir?
No, sir.
All right, time is 8:27.